Soren Kierkegaard, chapter 13. The crisis experience begins when man faces the nothing and sense of fear or anxiety that is the beginning of despair, parentheses, either or, and the concept of dread, close parentheses. Man must make the paradoxical, quote-unquote, leap into faith, from which he will receive an existential certitude in God. Kierkegaard launches his first powerful attacks against rationalism with such thoughts, which were seized by the existentialist school of thinking in our day as basis for its claim to being its spiritual successor. Modern existentialism, quote, covers a multitude of sins, close quote, parentheses, Alexander Drew, close parentheses, and ranges in its serious representatives from atheism, parentheses, Heidegger, Sartre, close parentheses, to Protestant biblicism, parentheses, Barth, close parentheses, Kantianism, parentheses, Jasper, close parentheses, Catholic social existentialism, parentheses, Gabriel Marcel, close parentheses, and the neo-orthodoxy of Reinhold Niebuhr. In spite of some basic differences, their opposition to the primacy of reason is as impressive as their emphasis upon our crisis or frontier situation. All of them stress the pathos of existence as experienced in either an unrelieved dread or the passionate desire to partake of God's infinity. All serious existential thinking has administered a severe blow to our intellectualism, and the new and unlimited perspectives given the universe by modern science has produced the view that, quote, an infinite universe of indefinite limits has no definite place for an infinite man, close quote, as Carl Lewis formulated man's predicament. Kierkegaard would hardly have subscribed to this later statement, as he could not have accepted the vague assertion that our crisis and dread are the essence of being a man, parentheses, Heidegger and Sartre, close parentheses. The paradox of modern existentialism is that it has created new systems of thought in spite of its efforts to persuade us that reason is an insufficient tool for shaping a worldview. Kierkegaard insisted on transcendence into the realm of faith in a manner similar to Nietzsche's later emphasis upon the perpetual inward contradiction in man, the tension between time and eternity, and the absurd and paradoxical as a valid category of life. The direction of living was different in each case, but Kierkegaard and Nietzsche concurred in their demand for transcendence. Kierkegaard's concern with the church and the individual's encounter with God was to become, in his later years, an all-absorbing passion. The church had become a fixed and static institution for whose maintenance, quote, the state appoints 1,000 approved, parentheses, close parentheses, or tested officials, and Christianity perishes in the ensuing palaver, close parentheses. This, quote, Christianity of nincompoops, close parentheses, close quotes, is nothing but a quote-unquote Christian crime, making the final decay of a church that once was meant to be a spiritually growing or becoming church as such an ecclesia militans. Kierkegaard was unable to experience in the actual church the community of spirit which he expected of a religious body bearing the name of Christ. According to him, the true community would be found only in the eternal, invisible church. We have seen how adamant he was towards the clergy, against whom he primarily directed his attacks upon Christendom. Quote, one hears often, and especially from the priest, that one cannot live on nothing. But precisely these priests manage to do just that. Christianity does not exist, and yet they live on it. Close quote. Such quotations abound in his writings. The term, quote-unquote, Christian was to him a polemic term, so that, quote, one can be a Christian only in opposition, close quote, to the world or to other men. As soon as this contrast is eliminated, the vocation of a Christian has lost its object. Quote, such is the case in our Christianity, which has slyly abolished Christianity by saying we are all Christians, close quote. Christianity has lost its vitality and is senile. We call anyone a Christian whose entire life belongs to other realms, who never goes to church, never thinks of God, and never mentions his name, quote unquote, except when swearing. The state recognizes these people as Christians. Quote, the church buries them as Christians, and they are dispatched to eternity as Christians, close quote. Similarly, and with equal logic, Kierkegaard applies his concept of becoming or evolving and striving to the individual Christian. The Christian will always be in the wrong before God because, quote, between God and man there is an infinite yawning qualitative difference, close quote. A statement identical with Karl Barth's modern emphasis on God's, quote, otherness, close quote. Man is impotent, but God can achieve everything, even our turning to faith. So great is the grace inherent in the beginning of all Christianity and in man. Okay, such austere demands upon the individual are diametrically opposed to most of our modern peace of mind thinking. Kierkegaard would never have exchanged the wisdom of Job for the techniques of psychological massage that promise such smooth sailing to those following Rabbi Liebman. The essential condition of this never-ending process of being a Christian is, according to Kierkegaard, unrest, peace of mind, and insecurity. An internal motion to be born only in prayer and repentance during the individual stands, quote unquote, before God in solitude. There has never been a Reformed church, and Kierkegaard, the Protestant, attacks the Reformation as critically as Nietzsche did a generation later from a different angle. Only the individual is to be reformed, as only the individual can undergo the conversion erroneously attributed to evangelicistic movements as a whole. God, for Kierkegaard, is primarily the refuge of the sinner, and the sinner's salvation lies exclusively in maintaining his faith, a doctrine quite in keeping with Luther's justification by faith. He who realizes his state of sinfulness is eo ipso a Christian because he measures his morality, parentheses, or rather lack of it, close parentheses, by Christian standards. The unbeliever does not have the religious experience of remorse. He does not, quote unquote, exist in the Kierkegaardian sense. Existence for the individual means at one and the same time closeness to God and conflict, unity and rupture, introspection and transcendence. The existing believer has a liberating sense of freedom because God's grace allows him to partake in eternity. He is not like Sartre's, quote unquote, free man, quote, condemned to be free, close quote, but ennobled to live in freedom as a daring quest. The emphasis of some modern existentialists on dread, fear, anxiety, or, quote, angst, quote, close quote, differs from Kierkegaard's concept of the corresponding term. His anxiety is moral and spiritual. Man's original state is one of innocence, as was that of Adam before his fall. But he has knowledge of guilt, of sin, and anxiety or dread in the presence of weakness is a permanent condition. The realm of moral and spiritual striving is never secure, but of uncertain potentialities. Virtue includes an apprehension of this potential power of sin, parentheses, or of the nothing, close parentheses. For Heidegger, this nothingness is a cosmological condition, whereas Kierkegaard, parentheses, and incidentally, as Freud, close parentheses, considers it a psychological state. The prohibition given to Adam not to eat from the forbidden tree, technically trees, that's my footnote, from the forbidden tree, produce in him this state of anxiety because he realized in the temptation the potential termination of his quote-unquote eternity. It was sexuality that introduced the temporal into Adam's life. Existence then as a moral and spiritual state of suspense implies this quote-unquote thorn in the flesh. Nearness to God can be experienced only in contrast to possible or actual alienation from Him. Only through extreme spiritual anguish can faith be won. Existence, according to Kierkegaard, is therefore a state of anxious suspense in which Jesus' Gethsemane experience is the supreme example. Only the paradoxical quote-unquote leap into faith will give man certitude in God. The opposite of sin is not virtue, but faith.